Welcome back to the Spatial Connection, the podcast where we explore the fascinating journeys of geospatial professionals and dive into the incredible ways location-based technologies are shaping our world. I'm your host, Kelly McGee, and today's guest is Tara Mott. With a background in geological engineering, Tara began her professional life in the energy sector and took some career detours through industries far removed from maps and spatial data. She eventually found herself at Esri, the world's leading geospatial company. Now, as an account manager, she taps into the deep well of skills she picked up along the way. Her story is a testament of power and adaptability, curiosity, and surprising ways past experiences can prepare us for unexpected opportunities. Let's dive into Tara's journey and see how it all connects. All right, well, welcome to the show, everybody. We've got Tara Mott here. Tara is working with Esri. She's been there for a few years, but you're going to find this is a very interesting conversation. Looking back, I've known Tara for quite some time, but as I got to talking with her and learning a little bit more about your background, you have more background than I thought, and it's very interesting. So I definitely want to learn a little bit more about your education that you got, how that all transitioned. So I'll let you weave that in as you go through, but I'm definitely interested in, what your bachelor's all the way up to your PhD. And also, learn about how you got started with GIS. This is one of the things we ask a lot of our guests. When I started, I was like, I never heard of GIS. And it was, one of those things that was still kind of thinking about it. It's hard to believe, but it was still kind of a new field, new industry. So a lot of people, it's how they learn about GIS is not always the traditional pathway, as we learned like from previous guests, like Andy. So with that, Tara, can you kind of give us an idea how you got started with GIS, where you learned about it, and how you started your career?
Well, thanks, Kelly. Thanks for having me. So I appreciate it. So honestly, I have a geological engineering bachelor's degree from Rolla. It was University of Missouri Rolla at the time, now Missouri Science and Technology. And GIS was a required course for a geological engineering degree. But I will say, so I took it, right? David Barr was my professor. And we were this is 1995, just throwing that out there. We were in this lab, like in the basement of McNutt Hall. It was a brand new lab with color monitors, right?
Because not the green ones.
Yep. Because that was new at the time. I think it was Windows 95, and we were using ArcView. I don't know what version number, but probably. It was so Esri software. So way back when, using Esri software, little did I know I would evolve and work for Esri someday at that point in time. But, doing a lot of like land cover vegetation. And of course, it was all raster data that I remember working with. And it was just, the pixels and things like that. And so, yeah, it was a required course back then. So really? That's what I did. But I didn't really think much of it. I did think of it. I did it. But I didn't think that was a career that I was going to go into by any means. But I will tell you that my first job, I had 2 internships there. I worked for Nicor Gas. It was Northern Illinois Gas up in the Naperville area. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. But anyway, I worked there, and my job, I was a reservoir simulation engineer, right, when I got out of college. And,
so you already got your degree in...
Well, when I did 2 internships during college, too.
I got you, okay.
So, but again, I still didn't really think about it that much. And honestly, at the time, I didn't really want to go work there because it was a utility company, and I wanted something more exciting, like in the oil field. But, that's fine.
Is that why you kind of looked at geological engineering?
Yeah, well, and they also gave me a scholarship. So,
good deal.
that's also one of those reasons. And not to say that it was an easier engineering degree, but I felt like I didn't have to take like thermodynamics and circuits and things like that, which I thought were the harder classes that I would struggle with. So yes, so an easier engineering degree. But anyway, but one of my jobs then when I was working there was, again, we had 8 storage fields, natural gas aquifer storage fields. And like initially I was really just more looking at like Excel spreadsheets, right? And pressure and flow, right? Of those and like how much we did, right? And how much storage, what was the volumetrics, right? But then when I was actually hired full time, my job was to actually simulate these and model these reservoirs. In fact, this is really funny. I was like featured in one of the news articles for the company and called, a model employee. And it had like, and my boss didn't know I was getting this done at the time. And they came in and they had like all these umbrellas up with the lights. And he's like, what's going on in here? But yeah, so, because he didn't think I was a model employee at the time, honestly, to tell you the truth. But okay, so what I did was I used the old school digitizing tablet, right?
Okay, yeah.
We had the paper structure contour map. So I had to do the shale cap rock, and then I had to do the aquifer, the sandstone, and basically I had
Is this
to.
from the geologic maps?
Yeah,
Okay,
the
yeah.
structure contour, yeah, like basically a topo map, but
Yes.
on subsurface, right? And then I had to enter this, and what I used was Surfer software.
Oh, I've used that.
You have? Okay, so I mean, totally basic, right? But I was actually digitizing and creating data to import into the model. And the model that we were using was, it was like Calgary. It was like Computer Modeling Group, and it was like IMEX.
Okay.
Like implicit, explicit simulation stuff. So anyway, basically I was capturing this data on the digitizing tablet and then importing it into the model. And I started creating all these great models and history matching and trying to get them to like perform so that we could do some more predictive stuff,
Yeah.
right? And so anyway, but the funny part is I didn't even realize I was doing GIS.
And what time frame, what years was this?
This is good questions. 1998
Okay.
was when I graduated, until 2003
Okay.
time frame. So this is what my first job. This was during the Enron era too. Do you remember that?
I do.
And
they had great printers.
we did business with Enron, and so I will say this was kind of a touchy time, for that. And anyway, then Northern Illinois Gas and Icor Gas, they had some. I'll just say there were some investigations going on around different things. They had a performance-based rate, like FIFO, LIFO layers of the natural gas storage. One of my bosses, or one of my managers, he'd already went to a company in Indianapolis called Proliance Energy. And basically, I didn't want to stay at Nicor Gas at the time. And, I had just graduated. I got my MBA at DePaul. So I was like, you know what? It's a good time to leave. Went through a bad breakup, right? I mean, and anyway,
Life events take you.
life events, right? And so anyway, there was an Indianapolis, like there was a great opportunity, and I, graduated, so I moved down there for a couple of years, and I was doing pipeline stuff where like arbitrage value of kind of like the gas of what you could buy it for, what you could sell it for. But we also had some storage reservoirs, but they were depleted oil and gas fields. So we were owned by Veteran Energy and Citizens Gas.
Okay.
In Indiana. So that's kind of where I was doing that for like 2 years.
And were you doing GIS there?
Not much.
Okay.
I would say it was more spreadsheets and financials, right? So no, I would say I wasn't doing a lot of that. But then, life again. But then I ended up dating a friend from college, right? And he was in Kuwait supporting the war at the time as a contractor. But I'd known him for 9 years, and it's actually who I ended up marrying, and we have our 20th anniversary tomorrow.
Well, congratulations.
So, I mean, it lasted, right? But anyway, he was in Kuwait, but, we dated. He was like, hey, let's get married. We decided on that. But it was a long-distance relationship, right? And so then he's like, well, do you want me to come to Indianapolis, or do you want to go to Germany? And he'd already worked in Germany. Then he came back, or then he went down to Kuwait for the war. And he's like, I can get a job back in Germany, or would you rather have me go there? And I was like, I mean, I have no kids. I have, so we decided that it would be a good opportunity.
Nothing tying you down.
Yeah, a good opportunity. I mean, my family's in Iowa, so it's not like they were
Close.
nearby. So yeah, so it's like, you know what? Let's go live overseas. And I remember saying, oh, it's going to be like a year. And anyway, 8 years later, we left.
How did you get over to Germany at the time? Was there a job that you went and chased?
No, so basically we had to get married. So we had that quick turnaround marriage. Like, I think it was a 4-month proposal to marriage,
Okay.
right? So because to come on his sofa, like for the U.S. government, for, getting that support, the status of forces agreement, we had to be married before we moved over there.
Okay.
So we did that. And so I basically went over there without a job. I quit a really good job. I mean, I was actually getting paid a lot of money, and we got good incentives.
That's a big decision to make.
No, I mean, and it was, but, again, I was daring, adventurous, I guess, at the
Sounds
time.
like it.
But yeah, then I went over there, and then I couldn't really get a really good job, I will say right out, because I didn't have a clearance or anything that the government typically values, right? But I worked for basically the Department of Labor as a contractor, because you had to have an ID card. And so I was a dependent. And anyway, we basically taught career transitioning workshops for separating military members.
Okay.
So anyway, I would go and I would drive all over the country of Germany. I went to all different bases, taught all different service members of every service. And, would be two or 3 day workshops. And anyway, so I did that for like 2 years. Okay. So it was not GIS related at all. But I think what it did do is got me over any fear of public speaking because I was facilitating workshops.
Which is really good for your current job.
Yeah. I mean, it's I feel like you're always learning something that you can apply to some of the future stuff, right? I mean, and you don't even think it. 'Cause I remember being like, I'm not like an HR person. I'm not a recruiter. But I mean, I know what looks good on a resume. Yeah. I know how to talk to people about interviewing. And they did really good training too. I mean, they even sent me stateside to get some training.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it was a good opportunity. I met a lot of great women. It was all women basically that taught these workshops. So, and I'm still friends with a lot of them today and
That's
still
good.
talk to them. So that was great. But then I saw an opportunity. So I was like, this job really, it wasn't a lot of money. I'll just say that. It was definitely not a lot of money.
But you didn't go there for the money.
No, I got per diem and my husband was paid well. And so it was fine. But then, I was like, okay, I'm kind of burnt out on this, right? Because there was a lot of, you can't like relax and you can't call in sick really because, people expect you to teach the workshop, right? So I saw an advertisement in the Kaiserslautern American newspaper. Like, yeah, right? And my girlfriend, Monica, she actually worked for the newspaper. So she was like my hiking buddy and good friend over there. We took German classes when I first got there and that's how I met her. And her husband and my husband, like we all became like a very tight friend group at the time. But I saw an advertisement for the GeoBase program. And anyway, it said you didn't have to have a clearance to come in the doors and you needed GIS skills. And I had just taken, because I was actually, while I was doing the Department of Labor job, I was also getting my PhD. Because they had a program in Germany at the University of Oklahoma had where it was a cohort program.
Okay.
And, I think they took up to 30 students in this cohort. And, they flew the professors in from Oklahoma and you'd have to do pre-work. Then they would have the professors there for like all day, Saturday, Sunday. And they were there typically during the week, and the professors would be like tooling around Europe, right?
Right.
And then the next Saturday and Sunday. So you have all day classes, 2 weekends in a row, and then you'd have post work, right? But you're with that same cohort the whole time. So anyway, I'd been taking classes, and I took 2 years basic classes. We had to spend 30 days in Norman, Oklahoma for our residency each year. This was like
Germany, Oklahoma, a little disparity there.
Yeah, this was 2006, 2007 timeframe. But again, I've got those friends too because I had to live, on campus. So my friend, she was UK, but now she's U.S. citizen. She's been married to an American. Her name's Strawberry. But she's actually, cleared and works at Stratcom now, right? Oh. And so it's kind of fun, just the whole thing. But she and I were roommates, but another still good friend, right? But I took we had I think you could take 1 or 2 electives, and I took a GIS class as an elective, unbeknownst about this opportunity, right? So I had recently taken a GIS. I was like, oh, that looks kind of interesting, right? So I took it, and so I had updated skills, I'll just say, with that. So I put all this into my resume, and I applied for the job, and I got it. And actually, the funny thing is, too, it was...
In which job was this?
This was the GeoBase job for the Air Force.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is in the A47. Yeah. And there's a woman named Tammy McCracken who basically hired me. Do you know Tammy?
I know the name, yeah.
But so Tammy's now working at Esri down in
really?
Georgia. Yep. But she hired me. This was north of Grumman at the time. And anyway, so I worked for almost a couple years for them and doing the GeoBase. And they got me with my secret clearance. So I got kind of into that system. But then we also, which is, if you know much about GeoBase?
I supported GeoBase for quite a number of years.
Okay, so you do know.
Yes.
Okay, so but, basically just the cadastre, mapping of all the Air Force installations.
One base, one map type approach, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I did that. So it was a really nice kind of gateway, I guess, into GIS with the Department of Defense. And, but then I'd met up with, because then we'd have these GIS kind of working groups or GeoInt working groups in Europe. So I got to know some of the J2 people or the intelligence people down in Stuttgart.
Okay.
And so I'm at Ramsey at the time, but then they were civilianizing a lot of the positions. My husband also worked for Northrop, but he was Northrop Grumman IT and I was Northrop Grumman Technical Services. So we didn't have like the same, but we knew a lot of the same people, right? But then they civilianized his position. So he moved down to DISA, which is Defense Information Systems Agency Europe in Stuttgart.
Okay.
And left me. We had one car, mind you. Okay, I'll just say this. We had one car. It was a VW Lupo and bright green, so people could see us coming. So we never got in a car accident. But we're always like, it's because they can see us coming. Because, but anyway, so
But the train system there is really good, so you can travel.
Yes, but what I will say is, I lived in Landstuhl, and I commuted into Ramstein, right?
Yep.
And there's no train there, just so you know.
Okay.
So
that is true. There's some places
there's
you're not
no
gonna get
train between Landstuhl, and so basically he had the car, so I biked to work every day.
Oh wow.
So it was fun though. It was like fresh morning, and it was.
You can look back on it today.
European, and again, I didn't have any kids I needed to drop off at the time, and so it worked, right? Then he ended up having a friend that could get me a job that he worked with at CSC, who basically put me in for an IT job down in Stuttgart.
It's a little change.
Right. So yeah, I will say you have to be kind of flexible and resilient, especially when you want to stay overseas and do these kind of jobs. So I went into the J6, which is the desktop support.
Right.
Yep. So I did desktop support and I did help desk.
Okay.
For 9 months. Only 9 months, because then CSC lost the contract, thankfully.
That's one of the challenges when you work especially in the federal side, and DoD I guess it's even more so, I feel like, is a lot of its contract support.
Oh yeah, completely. And you never know, so CSC lost the contract, but you know what? Lynette, you remember Lynette?
The name's on.
Lynette Whitehead.
Oh,
our
really?
security
Yeah,
manager.
yeah.
She was my security manager in Stuttgart for CSC.
Oh, really?
Yes. So, and now she works and she's our Esri security manager. So I will just say, so she put me in for my top secret clearance coming from the secret side. So I've worked with Lynette before she came to Esri. So I was there. They lost the contract though, and I went to work with the follow-on. But at the time, then my clearance was, upgraded. And then the J2 team said, hey, Tara, again, I knew them. So they're like, we're building out a job description that we want for you. And so they basically created a position for me called a GeoInt architect to kind of help manage what they were doing.
So now we're pulling back in that whole geospatial.
Mm-hmm. So again, because I knew them already and they knew that's what I wanted to do, because help desk wasn't going to be what I wanted to do forever. You learn amazing skills. You learn a lot of customer service, and nobody's calling you to say that everything's working, right? So, you always are trying to figure out how to solve problems, and help desk, you have to be kind of like that.
Investigator.
Yeah, but I'm trying to, it's that switchblade, or, you got to know a little bit about a lot of things, but, not
and
a lot
everybody
of.
uses different terminology, so you have to know how to understand what it is they're trying to say.
So, yeah. So it was challenging, and I had to even do some of those, overnight ones, right? And so, and I knew we were going to have a family at some point in time, so I knew that wasn't going to be what I could do long term. So the opportunity to go into the J2 and work in it's the J2 GINS shop, which is Geographic Information or Geospatial Intelligence and Services, or something to that effect. So they had a position, and then GDIT had the contract, and so basically I kind of walked into it a couple months into basically them setting up the job, right? Or after I started with a follow-on, it was a small company called Biken, which, I think they've now been acquired by SOSI, a small woman veteran-owned company, but they were great. And again, still, I feel like as you go through all these opportunities, though, I still have a great friend there who was my boss for 2 months, Jennifer McNamara. So she's still over in Germany, and when I go over there to support EUCOM and AFRICOM, we still go out to dinner.
That's awesome.
I've been working for Esri for 12 years.
Well, I think that's one of the things when you're going through these careers, once you leave from one position at a company and go to another company, it doesn't have to be, I'm done with this and it's gone. I still work with a lot of people that I have worked with over the years.
Like me.
Like you.
Right? Exactly.
So it's one of those things where as you're, changing jobs, I don't know how you saw it, but when I was younger, and it's been a while, but people looked at job changing as a bad thing.
Yes.
You should go to job, you should stay loyal, you should stay at that position.
Forever.
But exactly. And then now, even when I was, 10, 20 years ago, it seems like, that kind of started changing where people looked at, geez, new job opportunities as a new training ground and gave you new skills.
New ways to develop yourself.
And you kind of wanted somebody that had a little bit broader experience because they would bring in that different perspective. So it's not
100%. I honestly, I don't feel like changing jobs has been detrimental to me at all. And I feel like, yeah, you evolve and you expand your network by doing that. And I think that honestly, I'm trying to think of like any job that I have gotten without using a network. And I feel like pretty much everything has been that way.
And you don't just start with a network. You have to build that.
Yeah. And you have to like be consistent in that too. Yes. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a give and take. It's not a take.
Right.
And so being responsive to people and being helpful when you can, and all of these things like that kind of establishes your credibility and that makes people want to be in your network. I mean,
if somebody's going to help you out, help them out as much.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So yeah, it's totally a give and take thing for the networking.
So now you're coming into this new company here.
Yes. Okay. So then I'm in the, I'm a geoint architect and I'm working in the J2. And anyway, when I got hired though, I will say I was 8 months pregnant. With my first child. And anyway, so then I immediately and they were renovating the building. It was asbestos was everywhere. And then the senior chief petty officer guy I worked with, he wasn't my, direct boss, but Bush. He's like, Tara, you need to tell your boss, you need to get out of here because they're taking all sorts of things out of the walls and I don't want you getting sick. So, just a sweet guy. But anyway, so I basically went on maternity leave like a week early, right? But from GIT. But I came back, my 6 weeks later after having the baby. And, and I will say there were some GIT people that were like, we were kind of wondering if you were going to come back. And I'm like, why wouldn't I come back? And so I guess my mom worked and I just always assumed that I would too, right? And what we came into, my mother-in-law came over to help. Well, and we had a lot of family members that came over, but my mother-in-law came over for like 6 months to help us with Berkeley. And then we ended up having our neighbor next door. She had been laid off from Mercedes and like she had a back injury or something like that. And I was like, do you know of any nannies? And she's like, I'll do it. So honestly, we had a nanny next door. So basically,
very fortunate.
I didn't even have to like get the bottles ready or pack a diaper bag. And I could just go to work and come home. You know what I mean? And so, I was really fortunate. And then same thing with my second child. And and she was kind of a consistent. So again, we had the mother-in-law. We also had the next door nanny.
A lot of support.
We had a lot of support for over there. But then I'll say towards the end, things were great. I loved my job. I loved where I worked. I had fabulous bosses. We had a great mission. I got to do some really cool traveling, going down to Italy, doing some different TEMs, going to, we did a lot of just personal travel, don't get me wrong, but and even Israel, so for work. So just some kind of cool stuff, right? Stuff I don't regret at all and stuff that I feel like, it's just kind of, developed me. And again, some of those networking friendships and things like that. There's a woman who actually, we worked on GeoBase together. She was in the UK at the time and I was in Ramstein. But still, then she went to the J2 for a little bit up in Molesworth, UK. And she's General Dynamics now, but she was never General Dynamics when I was General Dynamics. But I usually still see her at every Esri user conference out in San Diego. And her name's Toby. And anyway, just fantastic, just relationships again started way back in the day, but then we always could figure out how we could help each other. And we went to many of these different TEMs and technical exchange meetings together, right? And
I think that one of the things you're touching on here is very interesting is I find this in the geospatial industry. You get a chance to be involved with so many different things. And you also have to be very flexible because you're a geospatial architect. A lot of people I think will be put off or hesitant to apply for something. I know it may have been kind of designed for you, but based on the name of a job. Architect. What's an architect? I don't know if I can do that.
What do I build, right?
So you really need to kind of understand what the jobs are, not just the title.
And the responsibilities and, requirements versus what are those recommended qualifications? Because I feel like a lot of people cut themselves out of opportunities that they would be just finely suited for. Right? So then I worked in, but what's kind of funny. So when I was over there in the J2 at UCOM or the European Command, Esri, this geospatial software company that I happen to work for now, they would have these different defense and intel user group meetings that they would host out in different locations in Germany. So I always tended to go to these. And, I would network with all the other people within theater, but then also with a lot of the Esri team members that were over there.
And I think those are something Esri's done really well at,
Yes.
is getting users to group together, meet up. And it also gives a lot of people that are not familiar with maybe GIS or geospatial. It's an intro for some of them.
Yeah.
They get to go to these meetings.
Well, and then you get to collaborate and kind of figure out what I'm doing, how I'm using this information, maybe learning about data sets that you didn't even know were
Yes.
available. So there was a woman named Patty Mims, who I still work for now, who basically helped me kind of guide my way into Esri. So I was really fortunate to have a really, and honestly, I will say at Esri, I want to always work with Patty. Well, and speaking of Patty, Patty was very influential in my career in actually transitioning to Esri, but also even moving to St. Louis. When I first started at Esri, I was actually in the DC office and supporting one
So
of...
you came from Germany to DC?
Yes.
Okay.
And, I think that we thought that was really the only path we had. We didn't see St. Louis opportunities or even know we honestly wanted to live in
Right.
St. Louis at the time. But we did have two small children, an 18-month-old and a 3-year-old, right? And we moved to DC, and I was supporting another intelligence agency customer as a solution engineer.
Okay.
And, they're...
Which a solution engineer, you get to actually do demos and
Yeah,
you
so
actually
you
get
do
to
more
work
of the
with software.
technical stuff. So
Yeah.
it was fun. And you learn a lot. I loved the team. I honestly wanted to stay a solution engineer, but at the time, they said that all the solution engineers needed to be in DC that were supporting the
Yep.
federal government. And so basically, though, my ninth day on the job, my husband is like, you know what? I just applied for a job out in St. Louis. I'm going to go work for DISA out there. Right. And he's like, just see if you can come. So basically he left me. Not really, but he
He's
did.
leading the way.
Yeah, he did have his mom come out to stay with me during this transitional period. But having a 1 and a 3-year-old was very difficult
Oh, I bet.
out there. And we kind of were like, you know what? Our family's all in the Midwest. His parents are in Fulton, Missouri, or we're in Fulton, Missouri.
wow.
My parents are in Iowa. So we're like, being in DC, you're still a big flight or
Yeah.
2-day drive away, right? So
Half
with
that's just getting through DC.
right. And so anyway, so he left and, he's like, well, see if you can find a job. But in the meantime, I was learning a lot and I was, working for an awesome company, right?
Yeah.
So I had told my immediate supervisor that, my husband had moved and I was really hoping if I could maybe transition to St. Louis because I knew that Esri had an office here. And, anyway, it bubbled up through management. And then, the leader, the director in charge of all the federal government, the global business development, he'd asked Patty, he's like, do you think that we should give her a chance to move to St. Louis and support NGA as an account manager? And Patty said yes. And so hence I was given the opportunity. And, it was, very serendipitous because I got to come in and replace someone who was leaving the team as, so they actually had an opening. And that's
Brian at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So it worked out perfect, honestly. And so, I've been in this position for 12 years, in the same position, not promoted, but honestly, with more responsibilities, and it's been a great ride. And I think that being an account manager for Esri, you're gonna get to find your own niche though too.
Yes.
It's not, and NG is such a large
is.
customer, right? Were you gonna say something
No,
about that?
you're fine. It's a very large customer. And I think that, there's a lot of opportunities to expand your network again in that there. But it's also probably, for some people, can be a very daunting, change of environments going there. It's like, ooh, how do I work within this big organization?
Yeah, well, and I worked for Chris Albert at the time, but then
yeah.
Brian Raymer kind of took me under his wing here and, introduced me to everybody here. And, I was like, well, is there something specific you want me to focus on, Chris? And he's like, Tara, just do your thing. He's like, there's a lot of problem sets that can be addressed. So he's like, just, you got to kind of make your own path. And so that was what was kind of fun about NGA because
And Chris was very technical too.
Oh yeah. Chris was the solution engineer, and actually I met him in Germany before I ever came to
did you?
Esri. So yeah, so I knew a lot of our coworkers before I ever came here. So that's why I kind of felt so comfortable walking in the door, to tell you the truth. Yeah. And I think that we both were established, they knew that I would, because before I came here too. Just one other call out, I was organizing the UCOM AFRICOM stuff from the government side of the house and like the GI initiative. So we would have like 2 days where we would do classified meetings. And then Esri would have the 2 days where they would do the unclassified, like technology demonstrations. And so I actually worked with Esri to coordinate the dates. And then I was responsible for putting together the agenda for the other 2 days. And they were responsible. So I'd already been doing this work with them. And so again, I was like kind of a known quantity to them because again, I'd worked with them already. And so it did really kind of ease the transition into working with them. And then in my new role, I still get to go out to UCOM and AFRICOM, and I manage the Esri agenda now, and I work with the other. Yeah, and so it's like I've done both sides of the coin, and so it's kind of fun.
So I think that's interesting, and I find this with a lot of different people that I talk with is, we were talking about changing the jobs, but you also find, at least I know I have, especially in the geospatial industry, while it is very expansive nowadays, it's still a small community.
Yeah.
And you will find people, as you mentioned already, that you have worked with in some other capacity or some other environment,
100%.
and you will still run across them. I think you mentioned earlier working at, like the Federal User Conference or the Esri's big user conference out in San Diego. These are great opportunities not only to learn more, but you can reestablish those connections, and you find out how other people are, navigating their careers, solving problems.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably one of the biggest things, we mentioned this earlier as well, is how do you build that network connection, And I think, as you can see, it's been very beneficial to
Oh,
us.
yeah. I mean, I don't think I've had a position that hasn't been basically through a network connection. But, it's, like you said, it's not just going to networking events, but like knowing like the give and take and the relationship and the follow-up, right? It's not just about exchanging business cards and never talking to somebody again, right? And so, I mean, that's not really going to do anybody any good, right?
You don't want to just send out a LinkedIn connection either, because that's the new business card sometimes, I feel like. You got to establish, like you said, that connection and maintain it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, even like us, we've known each other for quite some time. We don't talk on a weekly basis or even a monthly basis. Sometimes it's based on the events because there's a lot going on. But it's very important to still keep those connections because there's, it's like we were talking earlier. Do you know so-and-so? You might want to talk to this person. And it's very beneficial for a lot of people to do that. I want to take it back a little bit now. So you're back in the St. Louis area now, and you're doing you're working at Esri as the account manager. You've been doing this for 12 years, I think you said now. And, you've also been very involved with I'm going to say the geospatial community. There's a lot going on in St. Louis now. And I've noticed, keeping tabs with you, even if I'm not talking with you through what's going on through LinkedIn and some other media, but there's a lot going on in St. Louis, and you've been pretty involved with it. You're still teaching now?
Yeah. So actually, okay, so to go back to that community, so USGIF has this, the United States Geospatial Intelligence Foundation, they established a St. Louis area working group back in 2017, right after the decision was made for NGA to build in North City. And so I was part of that right away. I wasn't a chair to start off with. I was more on the messaging side. And then I kind of, did that for like close to a year. And then the primary chair kind of stepped away because it, honestly, it could be a lot of work.
Oh, I can imagine.
It could be overwhelming. USGF asked me if I'd be willing to do it. And at first I was like, well, I don't have tons of volunteer time. I got small children. This is like 2018 timeframe. And I'm like, ugh. But then, Esri was like, no, we think it would be good because we do want you to build that community because, like you said, Esri cares about building the user community and people that are interested in geospatial. That's good for everybody, right? Where you can network and find, partners and everybody else. It's a good thing to do. More people thinking geospatially and geographically, using that geographic approach.
Right.
So I was able to do that. We were doing meetings monthly and having to put together those agendas.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and Auntie Deering was one of the co-chairs with me, but everybody said, I did most of the work. I mean, people, they did a little bit, but I did a lot of it.
A lot of time.
Justin Bennett was also one of those chairs to begin with, too. And so, we would organize these meetings and getting people together. And again, it was just like, we're like, why are people coming? Like we're just like, but I think it was that people were coming for the networking, and then people got to share their stories. And it was always like, you can't sell anything, but it's more, you're selling yourself and you're talking about things that you're working on so that people could like understand what else was going on, right? And
What's
so
in common?
Yeah, well, and it was just also like, what's going on? So what can I be a part of? Maybe I'm doing something similar. We could like, combine efforts, something like that. So really doing that from 2018 till I still am doing it. So that's a long time that USGF's got some free labor out of me. But no, but it's been mutually beneficial, I think. Because I do think it expanded my network even more.
Oh, I bet.
And, and really kind of, it's a fun thing to do and kind of building that community. And, I'm part of the GeoFutures core team, kind of providing that industry perspective. So really just that, I love it, right? Excited for NGA doing their ribbon cutting in September this year. And, it's all coming to fruition. And actually, so I'm hosting well, now it's called the St. Louis Area Community of Interest because they said we weren't really working enough, right? I joke, but now it's called the SLAC. And so we just joke about this because it's another bad acronym, SLOG versus SLAC. But so we have a theme for our meeting that's going to be hosted at the GeoNet Symposium, and it's called 2025, the year of N2W, and a decision that started a geospatial movement in St. Louis. And so Robert Cardillo, was the NGA director who made that decision to build a North City, is going to be speaking. We also have Bill Caniana, who's the West executive for NGA right now, speaking. And so just to we're going to summarize and look at some of the transitions of what has happened in St. Louis over the last, 7-8 years.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that time frame is kind of important. It seems like there wasn't a lot going on, but the last 5 to 7 years time frame, there's been a lot of different events taking place. And I think that illustrates, it's very important. You got a career, you're doing that, but you need to be involved, I think, outside of that career.
Oh, 100%.
And even if it's small, in some working group or a state conference or something of that nature, I think you need to be involved. And I think you found that out. It's been very beneficial, probably even in your current job.
Well, yeah, and actually, so you asked about the teaching. And so honestly, I basically had the offers for teaching come out of some of those connections I made. I have a PhD, but I wasn't really leveraging it or utilizing it for anything. But then because I was getting involved with these different universities, because the SLOG/SLAC is, basically a lot of people that are academia, government, both federal and local, industry, and then community organizations, right? So it's bringing all these people together to do these kind of things. So I started, making friends with some of the universities, and St. Louis University reached out to me early on, I feel 2018 timeframe, and they asked me if I'd be willing to teach their introduction to GIS class. And, I was all excited at the time. I mean, I'm still excited, don't get me wrong. But I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. And so, just making sure my husband could take care of the kids, and things like that. So I just did a 1 night a week class, and, and I got to redesign it. And of course we're using Esri technology. But it was already using Esri technology, but I modernized it. And so I've been teaching kind of on and off during COVID and then different times with SLU since 2018. And it's fun. But then I was taking a little bit of a break somewhat during COVID from them because I wasn't really ready to go back in person. And so WashU had asked me, they're like, hey, Tara, would you be interested in teaching a class for applications in geospatial intelligence? You work at NGA, we work with NGA, sorry.
Right.
So I was like, yeah. And so USGF had this anthology that was kind of put out there that had a lot of learning lessons. And then
A lot of good resources.
Yeah, a lot of good resources. And I incorporated some of the Esri Learn lessons in there. And then I kind of got some different speakers from the industry to come in here. This was the University College, which is now CAPS at I don't know what it stands for, Center for Applied Professional Studies or something like this, right? So the non-traditional program where they would do the certification.
Gotcha.
And anyway, so yeah, it took a year basically where I did a lot of work and put this kind of program together. So I've been teaching that since 2022, I think, or 2023. Anyway, I've been teaching it for a few years now. And, but it's a lot of fun. But then I will say, even the Dade College asked now, they're like, will you do it in the environmental studies program? So I actually offer it for the University College in the fall and in the spring there. So yeah.
So you stay busy.
Oh yeah, I definitely, yeah. Tonight actually is my last night for the semester of teaching in person
Oh, wow.
here. Yeah, so a lot of it's virtual too, just so you know. So I'm not
There's still
always.
time that you have.
Oh, it's still time consuming, but a lot of it's online. But this is in person, so my students are actually presenting their work tonight, and
Awesome.
it's fun. And of course, using ArcGIS Online and things like that. And basically, I have them solve an intelligence problem or, apply it to something that they're interested in and then present it in like some type of web app.
And I think that's very important, not just to go through and just know what software does, but how you're going to apply that software. And this is one of those things, I think having someone that's teaching it that has that experience of seeing where it's been used, you can help kind of create some scenarios or help them through, here's how you would apply that. Applying that technology is a lot different than just know what button.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
that's why, like, for even my intro class and the class, the intro class at SLU and then this GeoIT class at WashU, basically I make them like, okay, we've learned everything over the semester. Now you apply it to a problem set that you're interested in. And if
Awesome.
you don't like your final project, that's your own fault because you didn't
You
pick
got to choose.
because you didn't pick something you were interested in.
Yeah.
So I mean, but I think they're like, sometimes they'll be like, well, I don't even know where to find the data. But I have one-on-one consults with every student, like to kind of go through the problem and then to kind of give them some ideas. But I'm like, the data is half the problem, or more than half the
Right.
problem. So you either have to find it or create it or geocode it. There's things you may have to do. You may have to do some table joins, but understand that if you don't have the data, you don't have a project.
Right.
Right? I mean, and so the data will sometimes even dictate what you can even do with that.
And I think that kind of goes, I'm going to tie that in a little bit with what we've been talking about, is getting that data. If you don't know, I'll go back to when I first started with GIS. That was a challenge, getting data. But these days, it's a lot more abundant, but you almost need to use that networking capability of knowing who can I ask that can help me find that data.
Yeah, you can. But I mean, sometimes I'm like, Google's your best friend, right? Like,
It's a great resource.
Google GIS data for your topic area. Like, that's where I start if I don't already know where
And
the
now they
source
have
is.
AI that helps
Yeah.
them out in this
Oh,
as well.
yeah. But what I do like about teaching geospatial is you can't just yet ask AI to complete
Oh,
the project
no,
for you.
no.
Like, there are still skills. You have to put in the work.
Right.
You have to know how to use things, and you still have to be able to complete a project. Like, sometimes they're using it maybe for the report, but that's not really the priority for me.
Right.
The report's,
That's not what you're
the
learning.
report's supplementary, and that's just helping me understand what you were wanting to accomplish here. But
Did you
building
even
out,
know what to ask it?
yeah, I know,
Right.
right? I mean, and so there's still like you have to learn skills to be able to even do this.
And with those skills you mentioned earlier, you need to stay up on the skills.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, especially, I feel that the technology is changing so rapidly, and especially in geospatial. There's a lot of, there's only so many different types of analyses methods that we use. You can only use so many, right? But how you apply them, how you share this data, how you transition from format to format, how do I translate that format? Those are all still evolving. How do we extract data? So I think you still need to be up on technology. And as when you're teaching, you still got to be able to keep up with that. I would think that teaching helps you kind of think about that more.
Well, 100%. And I will just say that, like, so if I were only doing my Esri job of being an account manager for NGA, I would not be up to speed at all on the technology because
It's not.
that's not what you
Right.
do, right? I mean, you have to know like the solution engineers or who to talk to about solving some of these technical problems.
Yeah.
But because I'm actually applying it in the classroom, like I'll have used our deep learning tools, right? And I'll be like, oh, well, you haven't installed, the deep learning libraries. That's why it's not working. Like some of my team members are like, what? And I'm like, oh yeah, well, because this is one of our exercises,
Yeah.
like for my labs. And so like I know these things because I'm teaching it, but not because of my regular job,
Right.
because and I have to update it every semester because Esri always is releasing new software.
software.
And so, and even this, so SLU's asked me to come back and teach in the fall. And I'm like, okay, so now I am teaching because I'm like, well, we're releasing a new book June 10th. So I have to basically wait until then because I don't want to build, I got to refresh it because like you said, the technology is always changing.
Yes.
And so like, I don't want to teach with GIS, like learning old software or ArcMap
Right.
isn't helpful to the industry. You have to learn current, most updated software there is available, or you're not marketable.
Right, because when you go to use it, you won't know how to use it.
Yeah.
No, I greatly agree with that. So I'm going to try to start bringing us to an end here. We've got through kind of where you're at today. Very interesting, the the pathway that you go through here. It's not a traditional, I went to school, learned
Definitely not
GIS,
linear.
got that job. Correct. And I find that with a lot of people that I talk with, not just on the podcast here, but, you find out how people got involved with it. So we learn how you learn about GIS. If you were looking back across your career time here, is there a project or a job that really stands out to you like, that was a great use of GIS? Is there any of those that kind of stand out to you?
I always think, site suitability always is good. I had to do some of this stuff in Ramstein for like geo-based stuff. So site suitability analysis, that's really powerful GIS because that's, putting your criteria and then getting locations that are, relative. But then also I will say the web GIS and sharing the information because I worked with different coalition partners and doing different things like that. And basically being able to share data in some type of common operational dashboard or COP, picture. I think where if you have your data stovepiped and it's not shared out there in that web environment, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so putting it out there, making it discoverable, I would say web GIS is definitely, I think, taking us to the next level. And even just working with people now, they're like, well, I don't even know where to find this data. And it'll be even people that work for NGA, right? And it's like, well, did you check here? And they'll be like, oh my gosh, this treasure trove of data, right? And I'm like, it's there, it's discoverable. But again, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so.
And this is where it's like somebody can help you find it.
Yeah. So yes, exactly. But so just kind of making data discoverable and open data as much as possible on the respective networks for what you're doing. There's tons of open data on, the internet, right? Yes. And that the government is, putting out there.
Yes.
And in local governments, and honestly, I always say that too, when I'm working with my students, if you're doing a project on St. Louis, you don't use a federal data set.
Right.
You use the local, because whoever's the most, I guess, the smallest common denominator on this, or St. Louis is going to get the survey grade data for their own city, right? And so think about what is the best data stores for leveraging for what project or what problem I'm trying to solve.
Yeah, where's that data cover? What is the extent? Who's it going to come? So you got your city, you got your county, your state. There's a lot of different levels in there that you can get that. So I guess the next question I'm going to ask, part of what we do here with this podcast and these series here is, if you were, sitting here, so you've got students you work with right now, so you do this already, so you probably got this down pat. But what are some recommendations that you would give to those that are still studying and those maybe just starting out in their careers? Is there some certain advice that you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, well, again, do the work, really understand what you're doing, ask questions of what you're doing. We've already talked about networking, but, again, understanding what it is to network and the kind of the give and take, but showing up, being at some of these different events, continuing to learn, as technology is always advancing, you're never going to be I've learned enough.
Right.
I don't need to learn anymore. Right.
What you just learned is old now.
Yeah. And so continuously learning, asking good questions. And, I guess just being open and flexible to kind of some of the opportunities and maybe taking some chances. Right. Right now, I have some students that actually had job offers with the federal government that have now, they're unsure of, I'll just say. And so I'm trying to kind of walk them through coming to some of the different events that I know about, just get out there, network. And then they're like, well, I got this job now with the state of Missouri. Should I take it? And I'm like, you know what? Any position you do, you will learn something from, and you will then become more valuable, to a future employer, whether it's Esri, whether it's the federal government. But take these opportunities and just know that you're developing and learning something that's probably more valuable than some of the education that you're getting. You got to have that check mark of a degree for most opportunities in our field. Not all, but get the degree, have the check mark, but then really develop that experience. And what you were saying earlier, having that variety of expertise and network, that brings more to your employer than a lot of other things you can do. And just getting a certification, getting that work experience and professional experience somewhere, and then establishing that network and then bringing that back to your future company. That's all going to add so much more value and credibility for you.
I agree. And thinking about even your career here, even if you go to a place, there's that little bit of uncertainty with times right now. If you get that job opportunity, you go there, let's say it's 3 months down the road and the job's gone. Okay. you still got 3 months of experience and you
Absolutely.
expanded your network.
And you got paid for it.
And you got paid for it.
I
Good
mean,
deal.
most important thing,
Yeah.
you still need to get paid for it.
So I agree. I think that's, you got to take those opportunities
Yeah.
because you don't know where they're going to lead you to.
Well, and exactly, like, don't, like, in some respects, like, the bird in the hand is worth more, it's here, just take it. I mean, if something happens and you decide to leave in the future, people understand. That's what happens.
Yes.
Like you said, nowadays, people aren't going to a career to stay there for the length of their life.
Correct.
Normally, it happens.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people decide, you know what, I want to try something new. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
So,
I think it's a trait. It's a good trait now.
yeah.
Well, Tara, I really appreciate you coming here and having this conversation with us, and I'm sure the listeners will be excited to hear how this all transitions, especially any of those people that have known you. I find this interesting. There's things I learn about you that as we're just talking, that you find out how people got to where they're at. You understand that it wasn't, it was pre-planned before I was in high school how I was going to get here. It takes a different path. And if you're going for a geospatial industry type job and you're in college, university, you're going to go through, you get the core skills. It doesn't mean you have to take a winding path. It's just, you have to look at the opportunities that present themselves. And I think that's a key thing for people to know as well. So
Thanks for having me, Kelly.
I really appreciate it. And with that, we'll end this one here, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on the Spatial Connection. I hope you enjoyed listening to Tara's story as much as I did. If so, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us on social media and visit our website for updates, resources, and behind-the-scene content. Do you know someone with a fascinating geospatial story that you'd like to hear about? Or is there a geospatial topic that you're interested in hearing more about? If so, send us a message. We'd love to hear about them and topics that you're interested in. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep exploring the world through the lens of geospatial technology.